Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, debuting with Ferrari, suffered one of the most controversial decisions of the year. Did he really deserve that sanction? Or is there anything else behind? But it all began to crumble before even the lights of the traffic light went out. During the laps prior to the race, double yellow flags were deployed in the last sector. These warnings, designed to protect personnel located on the grille and pits area, forced all pilots to a significant deceleration. This word, as subjective as decisive, would be the axis of controversy. The FIA, after reviewing Hamilton's telemetric data, concluded that its speed reduction, although present, was not enough to meet that criterion. The British reduced speed by 20 km per hour compared to its usual times, decreased the use of the accelerator between 10 and 20%, and applied the brake 70 meters before usual. But the commissioners, led by Rui Marquez, considered that it was not a marked deceleration and chose to impose a sanction. The truly controversial was not only the decision itself, but the moment and the context in which it happened. In a non-competitive phase without apparent direct risk, and with a pilot who clearly took precautions, a severe sanction was applied that directly impacts his next event, the Italy Grand Prix in Monza, one of the most important of the calendar and key in the history of Ferrari. Not only did Hamilton take away a possible good exit position, the pilot and the team also moved morally at a time when every detail counts. And here enters the element most questioned by many experts: the lack of consistency in the interpretation of the norms. Why other similar incidents in previous seasons did not receive the same level of punishment? Why didn't a warning or fine occur, considering the pilot's obvious efforts to reduce speed? The fact that the standard penalty was 10 positions and was reduced to 5 for mitigating circumstances shows that even FIA itself acknowledged that it was not a flagrant breach. This episode, beyond the technical, feels a precedent on how the FIA plans to apply the regulations in 2025. A clear message: there will be no room for soft interpretations, even if that means altering the course of a race or the championship of an iconic pilot. For Ferrari, this decision is an institutional blow. For Hamilton, an early warning that his way with the rampant Cavallino will not be easy. And for F1, a reminder that even outside the track, the big narrative turns are also defined by thousands of interpretation. Telemetric data are, in theory, the most objective way to analyze the behavior of a track pilot. Each acceleration, each braking, every small movement of the steering wheel is registered to the millimeter. It is these data that the FIA used to justify one of the most controversial decisions of recent years: sanction Lewis Hamilton with 5 stalls on the output grid because its speed under double yellow flag during the laps of training prior to the GP of the Netherlands. What the data showed was, in principle, of course, Hamilton reduced its speed approximately 20 km per hour compared to its usual rhythm in that same area during the practice sessions. The use of the accelerator decreased by 10 and 20%, and applied the brake 70 meters before what had previously done when entering the Pittsburgh lane. That is, there was a measurable, intentional and consistent reduction. But this is where the crack that divides pilots, teams and commissioners appears. Is that enough to comply with the FIA regulations? The regulation establishes that, in the presence of a double yellow flag, pilots must slow down significantly. But that term is not accompanied by exact figures or a defined margin. There is no table that indicates how many kilometers per hour they should reduce, or how much percentage of the accelerator they should release, nor how before they should stop. The evaluation is subjective and is at the discretion of the commissioners based on the circumstances. And in this case, that criterion became a double-edged sword. The official justification was that, despite Hamilton's visible efforts to lessen his march, they were not considered significant enough. In practical terms, the FIA applied a rigorous and strict reading of the regulation, arguing that the security intention should prevail above any technical consideration. However, this position has generated deep criticism, because even admitting that the speed reduction was not extreme, the data showed a clear will to comply with the norm. The fact that the standard sanction for this type of infractions is 10 positions on the grille, but that Hamilton has been imposed only 5, is also a revealing signal. The commissioners recognized the existence of mitigating, which is equivalent to saying, in unofficial terms, that the infraction was not serious, but they did not want to pass it without penalty. It is an intermediate punishment, which neither completely exempts or condemns, and that demonstrates the lack of a clear and uniform guide in the application of the technical regulations. This opens a greater debate about how telemetry is interpreted in warning or caution situations. If the data show a clear and measurable reduction, why is that effort ignored? What is then considered as a significant deceleration? And more importantly, how can a pilot adapt to that standard if it is not clearly defined? Frustration in Ferrari not only came due to the sanction itself, but by the feeling that the interpretation of the data was more political than technical. In a sport where each decision counts, and where the media pressure is constant, the subjectivity of the commissioners can become an unbalanced factor. And if this happens with a pilot like Hamilton with 7 world titles behind them, what can the rest expect? This episode has reopened an old debate in Formula One: the need for clearer, more quantifiable rules that allow teams to work with certainties and not with interpretations. Because if not even telemetry, that objective source of millimeter information, can guarantee an effective defense against a penalty, sport enters into a field where the subjective can alter the competitive balance. The Hamilton case, then, is not just a controversial sanction. It is a mirror that reflects one of the great contradictions of the modern F1, the coexistence of cutting-edge technology with standards that continue to leave space for interpretation. A dangerous land, especially when there are championships, reputations, and historical careers at stake. The sanction imposed on Lewis Hamilton in the Netherlands Grand Prix not only ignited the alarms within Ferrari, but also revived a debate that has been latent in Formula One for years: the inconsistent application of the regulation by the FIA. The decision to penalize Hamilton for not slowing down significantly under double yellow flag exposed a dangerous ambiguity that has been subject to repeated criticism by both pilots and team directors. Because when talking about sports justice, coherence is the essential pillar. And what many see in this situation is anything but that, because there is something that cannot be overlooked. The FIA did not apply the complete sanction. 10 grille stalls was the standard punishment, but was reduced to 5 for mitigating circumstances. This shows an implicit contradiction. If the data showed that Hamilton made a real effort to reduce the speed and the commissioners accepted it, why punish it first? Where is the exact threshold between insufficient and adequate action? And above all, how can a pilot know with certainty when not even the commissioners themselves seem to have a unified stick? This is not a minor problem. In a sport where error margins are microscopic and where each position can define the outcome of a championship, certainty in the application of the rules is indispensable. It cannot depend on the subjective criteria of a group of officers who, career to career, apply different interpretations of the same norm. Because if a pilot can be sanctioned for reducing speed by 20 kilometers per hour, while another is acquitted by reducing 10, then F1 ceases to be a skill and strategy championship, and becomes a lottery of interpretations. Even inside the paddock, the discomfort was evident. Several teams commented, on condition of anonymity, that the decision against Hamilton was a worrying precedent. Because if the FIA begins to punish gray interpretations, without firm and transparent criteria, no pilot will be really protected. Today was Lewis. Tomorrow can be any other. The question is, who decides and based on what? In theory, the regulation seeks to protect the integrity of the careers, guarantee security, and maintain equity. But if these norms apply selectively, depending on the context, the name of the pilot, or the media impact of the sanction, the sport loses one of its essential values: equality before the law. And that is exactly what is at stake when we talk about the double rod of the FIA. The penalty imposed on Lewis Hamilton not only physically drives it from an ideal grid position for the Italy Grand Prix, but also introduces a series of sports and psychological consequences that directly affect not only its individual performance, but the internal dynamics of the Ferrari team in this season 2025. This sanction, although apparently punctual in the short term, in the narrative of the championship and in the confidence of the pilot himself in his adaptation to a new team. From the sporty point of view, this penalty comes in the worst possible time. Ferrari, who began the season with many doubts after an injured debut in Australia, seemed to have found some stability in the Netherlands GP. The performance of the SF25 in classification was competitive, and Hamilton began to show clear signs of adaptation to the new car, both in race pace and in consistency. Losing 5 positions in Monza, the temple of speed, where overtaking opportunities are limited due to the high aerodynamic load and average speed per lap, deeply condition any career strategy. Especially for a pilot who needs immediate results to consolidate within the team and send a clear message to his rivals. Do you think the sanction to Lewis Hamilton was fair? Or do you consider that the FIA is using its case to establish a new line of authority that can put the competitive essence of Formula One at risk? Leave it in the comments.